Hello everyone, my name is Marc Chapelle. I work with a company called Intouch365, and at Intouch we aim to help organizations to better understand their customers so as that they can provide better and more personalized customer experiences. For this, we make use of technology in the form of customer data platforms, CDPs. But what exactly is a CDP, and how does it differ from a CRM system, for instance? With questions like these, I went to the CDP Institute and I talked to its founder and CEO, Mr. David Raab.
So the CDP Institute is a vendor-neutral organization whose mission is to help companies do a better job with their customer data.
Okay. And the customer data could be any data that contains information about the customer. So what are, the name and the address of the customer is very obvious, but what other examples of customer data should I think of?
Well, there's really two kinds of customer data. There is the more static data, which are things like their name and address, which don't change very often, though they can change. And then there's behavioral data or events, which is things like what you do on the website or what you purchase or where you go, location data. And that obviously changes constantly. And there's way more of that than there is of the static data. So part of the issue with customer data management is that your CRM system is going to have your static data. It'll have an address and it'll have a name and a phone number. But most CRM systems don't track the events. They're not designed for that. It's too much data. They really wouldn't know what to do with it. So that's why you end up with other systems that are more focused on that, which is where CDP comes in.
Yes, personally, I have a background as a CRM vendor, and for years I've been telling my customers that their CRM system should actually be this central repository of customer data, and they should make integrations. But you're right, those systems weren't particularly designed for that, and therefore it caused a lot of technical issues, and it was a hell of a job to make all those integration, and then still they didn't work. So why is the CDP different?
Well, exactly what you said. The CDP was designed to solve that problem. So you use a different technology when you do that. A CRM is usually going to be on a relational database, which is very good with discrete units of information, rows and columns. But you're limited in the amount of data you can store, really. Relational databases can get big, but they still are kind of limited. As opposed to the CDP, which really usually uses a different technology to store much more large volumes of data. It can store unstructured data and semi-structured data. So all of your web logs, for example, which really are not SQL databases, they're usually JSON files, different format. So the CDP simply was designed to handle that. And once you know that's your goal as a designer, you build a system that can do it. It's not that there's anything magical about the technology. It's simply that they chose the technology that was suited for their purpose.
Right. So in this CDP, you bring together all that different customer data, structured and unstructured, as you said. But then it's sitting in your CDP, and what do you do then with that data? And who's working with it? How does that work?
Well, the CDP can simply be the repository of the customer profiles, and then other systems can access the data in the CDP and use it for predictive modeling or to drive marketing campaigns or to drive emails or to drive advertising audiences, just pull it out and use it for whatever purposes they were going to use it for. Some of the CDPs extend beyond the data storage to actually have those kinds of activation capabilities themselves. So some CDPs have, say, an email engine or a personalization engine or a predictive modeling system built in which case they do all that work themselves and then just give the outputs, say a predictive modeling score, to some other engine that's going to be in a call center or perhaps a website or someplace. So the scope of the CDPs actually varies quite a bit, but the core thing they do is they make that data available to other systems so that it can be used to generate better customer experience.
Right, but it's very interesting what you're saying. Some of those CDPs are capable of automatically make these data or transform the data into actions for somebody or for another system. So it's not always somebody who has been to look at a dashboard and seeing, oh, the metrics are changing, so I have got to do something, but actually what the action is presented automatically to a user, or something happens with the customer data, or how does that, can you give some examples of how that would work?
Well, again, first, to be very clear, it varies. Some CDPs do that,
Yes.
some CDPs don't. Okay, so the ones that do it have an interface that looks like a marketing automation system interface where you can design customer journeys, and the journeys execute. And again, it's just using the data that's in the CDP directly rather than having to load it into some other system that has more complete data. Again, advertising audiences, the CDPs can do what a DMP can do in terms of selecting an audience and pushing it out to Facebook or Google or whoever it is you're sending your audiences to. And they can get, so then, they have proper API integrations to make that fairly easy. For personalization and recommendations, again, they're going to have predictive modeling tools. So you would open up your predictive modeling tool in your CDP and say, hey, I want to build a model that predicts churn. And depending on the system, some can do that automatically. Some require an expert user to build the model, but still provide the data and the functionality. And then you take that model score from the model and you put it on the customer record as an attribute. And then you can use that score to drive, again, your journeys or your advice to your call center agents, or to personalize the website, whatever you want to do with it.
Right. So which industries or which types of organizations a CDP is especially relevant for? Is it relevant for all kind of organizations that have customer data, being all enterprises, or do you have to be a large organization to be able to work with the CDP? Or
well, there are some industries that have made greater use than other. We've actually been doing a lot of research on that just recently, as it happens. Retail has been the primary industry. I would say even today, maybe half of the implementations of CDP are in retail.
Okay.
Certainly half the vendors do a lot of retail. Financial services has come up more and more as a secondary. We see some telco, we see some travel and hospitality has actually been a fairly big one. Now we're publishing and media is another big one. Now we see more education, healthcare, sort of bigger ticket, longer consideration purchases. So, it's really easy to prove the value of the CDP when you're a retailer, because I'm doing better segmentations, I'm getting better responses. I can see the next morning that I got more sales. If you use it even in something like financial services, depending on what you're selling, well, people don't open a new bank account every day. They don't take out a new loan every day. So it takes a little longer to see the results of that. So that's made it a little harder for those industries to see the benefit. In terms of size, certainly originally something used by larger companies. These are not cheap systems. You're looking usually at around $250,000 a year or up, although there's some that are cheaper. Again, as the industry has matured, we've seen vendors specializing in different areas. So there are some vendors who specialize in smaller businesses. There are some who specialize in mid-tier and some who specialize in large, and some cover the full range, of course. So at this point, you can find a CDP for any budget, but to be honest, if you're a small business, you may or may not have the right people to take advantage of what the CDP can do. So that is probably more of a limit than the actual cost of the product, is simply being able to use it appropriately. And it's also some fair amount of integration work. So some technical resources required to put it in place and maintain it. And putting it in place isn't that hard, but maintaining it as things change, because things change constantly, is going to be a continued investment. And again, a lot of small companies simply don't have the room to do.
Okay, I understand. I also understand from what you're saying that the technology is rather advanced and it isn't that hard to implement it technically, but it might cause, you starting to use the CDP might cause some organizational change and behavioral change of the people working in organizations as well. Do you agree on that, or is that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, honestly, if it didn't cause organizational change, you're doing something wrong. It really
It
should
would make
cause
sense. Yeah.
organizational change. A lot of what the CDP does requires cooperation across departments. So, you're using data from the physical retail store to guide the website. Those two groups never talked to each other before. So
Yeah.
now they want to cooperate, and that's a good thing, but it's an organizational change. You have to um, begin to take a sort of a customer level view, not a channel level view of your customers, or a product view of your customers. So that's a big change, because you want to make sure you're maximizing the lifetime value, which may mean you're shifting sales from one product line to another, for example, or from one channel to another.
Yeah.
And the channel managers have to adjust to deal with that. So there's quite a bit of change, and what our research shows is that when projects have a problem, it's much more likely to be an organizational problem. The technology works. I mean, just like most technology, if you implement it
Yes.
properly, it works. It's really almost always comes down to deployment. And you would have seen that in the CRM world as well,
Yes,
adoption
of
being
course,
the
of
issue.
course. Yeah. So what you're saying is departments often really sit on their own data protected and are not really also willing to share data with other departments, with other uh, sides of the company. So that's one, the willingness to share the data. But also the data might, of course, be in different formats, and there might be quite some data transformation needed to be able to understand that one data set is actually saying the same as another one, or it talks about the same customer. Is that automatically solved by the technology, or is that a hard nut to crack as well?
Uh, well, it's not automatic in that you push a button, although we're getting to think that with AI, it will become automatic fairly soon. Parts of
Yeah.
it actually already automatic. And that's actually a very important change in the industry right now, because that data acquisition has been a bottleneck, forever. Not just a CDP problem, it's a problem integrating any systems. And we think AI is really going to remove a lot of those integration barriers, which will make deployment of CDPs much easier. But yeah, you have a problem both with departments being protective of their data, but also being protective of their business processes. They don't want to change how they do their jobs.
Yes.
So that's different from just, okay, yeah, you can read my data, but you want me to do something differently. That's a much bigger change for a lot of organizations. And that's really where you need that cooperation, because they have to see how it's going to help them do their jobs better and get better results for their departments. Because often just knowing that it's better for the company as a whole isn't quite motivation enough.
Okay, so if we, for instance, stick to a retail example, you said retail is the primary industry for CDPs at the moment still. So the after sales department, the customer service department, has their own database. Of course, the marketing department has a database where a lot of segmentation is going on, and the marketers might say, okay, we'd like also to be able to make use of the after sales data for our segmentation. Then the customer service guys say, well, okay, we're willing to share, but then we want to be sure that uh, you actually don't interfere with our customer loyalty or ideas or what have you. How would you kind of convince the different departments to share the data? What best practice there?
Well, best practice, again, you're talking change management.
Yes.
Change management is difficult, and CDP is just a technology. So, it's not going to solve that problem just because you deploy a CDP. So change management is about managers forcing, or leading, I should say, the workers to look at a problem from a company-wide perspective and understanding, or from a customer perspective, better still, and understanding, okay, this is something we want to do. The customers will like this. This will be better for them. This will be better for us as a business. And here are the changes we want to make. So one of the absolute classic CDP use cases, for example, is to let the customer service agents see what the customer who's calling them just did on the website.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
if they can see that, they can say, oh, they've been looking at this product, they've been visiting this part of the help section because they have a particular problem going on. Whether you tell the customer that you can see what they did on the website is another question. Probably in many cases that'll feel a bit creepy to them. But just knowing what it is will allow you to, as a customer service agent, to deal with them more correctly. And similarly, you really want that customer service agent to see the entire customer history, not just the recent web history. So that's the most interesting, but what did they purchase in other channels? How long have they been a customer? What's their total value, which is not necessarily stored in a CRM system, which is what the customer service agent is going to be working in. So very, very common to have the CDP data be exposed in a window within the CRM system, not even imported in the CRM system, simply just exposed so they can see it, so the agent can view it and get a better picture of the full context of this customer so they can deal with them more effectively. So, okay, so that's great. And I say technically non-trivial, but certainly doable and very standard. Now you have to train the agents to use that stuff. Okay, that's a behavior change. Yeah, and that's something that the managers in the customer success department or the customer service department have to buy in, because that's going to make the calls longer. It's going to change their success metrics. It's a big problem. So those managers have to understand the value. They have to communicate that down to their subordinates, the people around the front line. And honestly, senior management has to make sure that everyone is working together across departments, because that's what senior management is supposed to do. Yes. So it's a big commitment.
All right. And so you also mentioned already AI, which of course is one of the biggest developments and the most quickly adopted technologies, I think, recently. So you already said AI might play a role in understanding data sets from different departments and interpreting that data and basically understand how to connect and how to come to these unified customer profiles. But you also see AI playing a role in, for instance, automatically profiling or segmenting customer data.
Oh, yeah, definitely. AI has many roles to play. Certainly segmentation is one of the clear ones. Again, predictive modeling, prescription, where the AI says, hey, here's some customers who are not being contacted very often. You should find a program to increase their value, to reach out to them more often. And then, of course, if it's a really good AI, I'll say, and here's what that program should look like, and maybe it'll write it for you and put it in market for you. And all you have to do is say yes, okay, I agree to that.
Yeah.
And and we're getting there, and we're getting there very rapidly, as you know. So AI, it's going to ultimately impact pretty much every stage of that customer relationship, and is already really starting to in a very big way. And there's some longer term questions about where things go and what happens when the AI when the customer has their AI and it's doing the purchasing on behalf of the customer. Yes. and then the machine's talking to the machine, and there's some interesting questions getting back to that issue of work, change, management.
Ethical questions, I think.
Well, there are definitely ethical questions. AI, can have bias based on its training sets, and it can do things that are rational but not desirable, in terms of discriminating against people, even if it's a rational discrimination that you choose not to, you think shouldn't be done. But it also can take tasks that are separate, like you have a copywriter over here, you have a graphic designer over there, they're different people. You could have separate AIs for both of those. But actually, what would be much better would be to have one AI that does those both simultaneously, so it can sort of talk to itself and trade ideas. So, well, we could have this cool image. What segment would appeal to that image? What text would support that image? Because we think this is a really powerful image, and the AI can actually figure out what will be a powerful image. So you want those separate tasks to be combined. Segmentation the same way. Well, let's not do a segmentation and then decide what products to sell these people. Let's look at our products and figure out what's the right segmentation, or let's adjust our segmentation as we adjust our products. So they want to interact with each other. So that'll really change the division of labor, which is something we're just beginning to get our heads around.
Yes. And as far as the regulations when it comes to using AI and the legislation, I think this answer might differ in the US than from Europe, where we are. But there's a lot going on there. Of course, we have the privacy legislation, the GDPR, here in Europe, and the different laws in the US. But what is the current state, as far as you're aware, of the legislation concerning the use of AI for profiling and segmentation?
As I'm sure you know, the European Commission, there are many European bodies, but
Yes.
the legislature there has I think just passed actually some draft of an AI law that said we're going to classify AIs into different risk levels and have different degrees of regulation depending on how dangerous they are. And, it's a pretty well thought out scheme. They've been working on it for a couple of years, really. It's just sort of come to fruition now because there's so much attention. The U.S. is much behind, as the U.S. tends to be when it comes to regulation. There just beginning to be some interest at the federal level in perhaps putting in place some regulations. Some of the companies have been asking to be regulated, which of course should make you nervous, because why would they do that? And there are some business reasons that if you're a leader in an industry, you want to have regulation because that actually prevents competitors from entering. So there's a great deal of self-interest going on there. And there's, also some genuine, I think, concern among the experts and among the businesses who are doing AI that this thing could really be quite dangerous. And then on the other hand, you have Meta, who's just open sourced all their AI all their large language model technology. So they'll give us any bad guy in the world now can just has their hands on that. So it's a little late to suddenly say we're going to restrict access, because thank you, Mark Zuckerberg, for screwing things up yet again. But whatever.
I agree. So actually being compliant with those regulations and thinking about also the ethical issues is one important part, I think, of a CDP implementation. You have to be aware and you have to be concerned. We also talked already about the organizational change, the behavioral change in the willingness to share data amongst departments, etc. What other pitfalls or risks do you see for the implementation of a CDP? What are things that people should be thinking of or aware of?
Okay, well, certainly you touched on ethics, but also privacy regulations in particular.
Yes.
And I think in Europe, more than in the US, there's been some reluctance to use CDPs because there was concern that it might result in privacy violations, or I should say new privacy violations, which is somewhat ironic because really the CDP gives you more control over how your data is managed.
Yeah, that's also true, of course. Yeah.
So it's actually going to make it easier to ensure you don't have privacy violations. But that's a message that takes a little while for people to accept. So it kind of cuts both ways. Other pitfalls that people run into, again, adoption is the biggest one, much more so than technology. Cost is an issue. So what we see right now, and I guess this is a pitfall of sorts, is that a lot of companies at least think that they don't need to buy a packaged CDP. They think that, they can just take their existing systems and extend them a bit. So let's just add some features to our CRM to build their own. CDP. Based on their CRM or based on their data warehouse. And the short answer is that usually doesn't work, but it takes 2 or 3 years to find out that it didn't work. So there's a pitfall there of trying to go down that path. Right. And not having the resources to do it right. I mean, it's not that it can't be done. It can be done. For some companies, it's actually more efficient than buying a packaged product. It really depends on the state of your current systems. So if you've done most of the work, it's like in financial services, for example, where they've already done all the profiling and all the identity resolution because they have to. Extending those existing systems to a CDP, probably a plausible choice, a defensible choice. In retail, where they haven't done none of that work traditionally, starting basically from scratch, it would be a very questionable decision to think that you're going to do it all with your in-house resources. So that's a big pitfall, is making the wrong decision, I suppose, in either direction.
So people really have to be also aware of their use cases, right? Is that always, in your experience, the case when they start an implementation? Do people know what they want?
Right. It always comes down to use cases, and we talk so much about use cases that people are tired of hearing us talk about use cases, but no discussion
Let's call
can
it
get,
reasons why.
yeah, no discussion gets very far without coming down to use cases. And we actually have a very long online course that we give, like a 4-hour course on that. That's free, cdpinstitute.org, that people can take, that talks about use case development. And most of it is just very generic. Here's what a use case is. And one of the interesting things that we surfaced when we designed that course is how the use cases you need to look at differ depending on what you're up to. You look at different use cases when you're defining system requirements than the use cases that you look at when you are planning your deployment, for example. Okay, because they're different. So you really have to think. It's not enough to say, oh, use cases are important. Give me a list of use cases. You have to say, well, what am I going to use these use cases for? Let me make sure I have a list of the right use cases. So just for that example, when I'm designing requirements, I want to look at my most sophisticated use cases. So I make sure that I capture in those requirements those high-end needs. Otherwise, I build a simple system and then I kind of run out of power. When I'm deploying, I want to start with my simplest use cases, right? Because that's so they're different use cases. So you have to think very carefully about when you're building your use cases. What am I going to use them for? What are the right use cases for this purpose? You'll eventually build them all out, of course.
So, okay, what you're saying is the CDP Institute provides free of charge course to actually learn how to work with those use cases and to relate it to a CDP.
Yes, we actually have several. This is a relatively new initiative for us. We have 3 courses that are deployed right now. One's on use cases. One's on how identity resolution works, which is a mystery to many people. And again, a very detailed, comprehensive course. Another one, a shorter course on making the build-buy decision specifically. That's a very, very hot topic right now. There's a 4th one that should be out sometime in July, looks like. I thought end of June, but they're not ready. On running the vendor selection process and running a proof of concept and how to make sure that the system you buy is really the system that you thought you were buying. So, those are all very specific skills that people are needing to be trained on, and we're very eager to help them get trained, all free, all online, on demand, good stuff.
Provided by the CDP Institute, of which you are the founder. So maybe we can talk a little bit about the CDP Institute itself. How long does it exist? Why did you establish it? And what do you see the current role and developments? A lot of questions in one.
Okay, sure. Well, my favorite topic. So, all right. So I named the CDP category in 2013. That's my main claim to fame in life, apparently. I've been a marketing technology consultant and industry analyst for many, many years. In 2016, the concept of CDP really began to catch fire. All this, we don't know why. I mean, I was talking about it constantly, but for whatever reason, 16, the market takes off, and a couple of the vendors at that point came to me and said, well, you're kind of the guy for CDP, so maybe we could do something to build more market interest. And we hatched the notion of a vendor neutral institute because I didn't want to be working with only any single vendor. So the institute was designed from the start to be this vendor neutral educational organization. And that's what we are. So we have the training courses, as I say. We have a website that is a library of white papers, publish a daily newsletter. We have a blog. We have a Slack channel. We publish certifications of CDP vendors. We audit them and make sure that they do what we think a CDP should do. And we give them a little real CDP certification. We publish vendor comparison reports. We do surveys of the industry. We do a lot of things, again, just to help educate people and help them make a better choice, particularly about using their CDP, but really with customer data in general. Because we are vendor neutral, we don't sell CDPs. We don't sell consulting. So, we don't really care what you buy. We just want people to get the right stuff.
Yeah, so you really are evangelizing the idea of CDPs and the use of it, and you try and really provide the world with as many tools as possible to free the customer data, basically.
Exactly. We have an RFP generator. We have a use case generator. We have lots of very useful things that were very useful. And again, all free. CDPinstitute.org is the website.
Well, I'm very sure that everybody goes running to that website now immediately. So, yeah, with this note, actually, I'd like to thank you, David, very much for your time. I think it was very nice to chat with you about this topic that really excites me as well, because I'm, as I said, coming from the world of CRM 2 years ago. The world of CDP was completely new to me, and now I'm really enthusiastic about some implementations I'm involved in, and I think I can learn a lot from you and from the Institute. So very nice that through this podcast we actually met as well. So thank you for that, and I hope that also through this podcast a lot of our listeners will kind of know how to find the CDP Institute and will free their customer data.
Very good. Well, thank you for having me. I also hope they find cdpinstitute.org and much success.